And we're back. I'm Batsalo. This is Neil. Say hi, Neil.
Hey.
Okay, Neil's going to read the Talmud, the ancient book of Jewish wisdom. Here we go. We're in Shabbos, Daf Tet Zayin, Amud Aleph. Tet Zayin means 16. Okay, here we go. Start with Shimon ben Shetach. Read the Hebrew and then read the English. But you got to project it so that people can hear it out there in YouTube.
It's actually too small for me to read.
Well, let's just try reading one paragraph. It's very slow.
Shimon ben Shetach. תיקן כתובה לאישה וגזר תרומה על כלי מתכות. Should I translate or
just read the whole thing? Or
okay,
just read
כלי מתכות דרייתא ננחו.
דרייתא ננחו.
דרייתא ננחו. דכתיב אחי הזהב אך עת הזהב ואת הכסף. גוי וגוי.
וגומר.
וגומר.
etc.
לא דמר. לא נצחה אלא.
Sorry, דמר.
או דמר. We skipped a line?
I skipped a line.
לא נצחה אלא לטומאה.
לא
נצחה אלא בטומאה ישנה.
Good.
דאמר רב יהודה, אמר רב, מעשה בשל ציון המלכה שעשתה משתה לבנה ונטמעו כל כליה ולשברתן ושברתן ונתנתן לצורף ודיתכן ועשה מהן כלים חדשים ואומרו חכמים יחזרו לטומאתן ישנה.
Great. Okay, now please read the English and try to read it louder. This one? No, this one.
We learn that Shimon ben Shetach instituted the formula of the marriage contract for a woman and decreed impurity upon metal vessels. The Gemara asks, aren't metal vessels impure by Torah law, as it is written? But the gold and silver and the bronze and the iron and the tin and the lead, anything that came in fire, make it pass through fire, and it will be pure. But with the fire of sprinkling it will be purified, and anything that did not come in fire, make it pass through water.
The book of Numbers.
Numbers 31, 22 to 23.
If you really want to know the exact location.
The Gemara answers, this ordinance of Shimon ben Shetach, with regard to the impurity of metal vessels in general, was only needed with regard to previous impurity, reassumed by metal vessels after they are recast. As Rav Yehuda said, that Rav said, there was an incident involving Shimon ben Shetach's sister, Shel Tzion, the queen, who made a wedding feast for her son. All of her vessels became impure, and she broke them and gave them to the smith, and he welded the broken vessels together and made new vessels. And the sages said, what she did was ineffective, as all the vessels will reassume their previous impurity.
Okay, so what do we learn from this? First of all, who is this woman, Shaltzion the queen? She was the queen of the Hasmonean dynasty, the wife of King Alexander Yana, the sister of Shimon ben Shetach. So it might be Shalom Tzion Amalka, the famous Shalom Tzion Amalka, or maybe it's a different woman, but it's from the same dynasty, certainly related. You see, it could be either Shal Tzion or Shlom Tzion. Suggests that they were different people. They might have been the same person. We don't exactly know. Some sources call her Shalmonit or Shulamit, just different names. But she was initially the wife of the Hasmonean king Aristobulus. So after her death, the brother Yanai performed the act of a levirate marriage with her. The levirate marriage, remember? There's you got two brothers or any number of brothers, and you have one brother, and he gets married, right? And Oive, he dies before having a kid. Still today in Jewish law, what do we got to do?
Have the other brother spit in her shoe.
Well, again, don't put the cart before the horse here. First, one of the brothers has to
marry her and make children.
Yibum. Has to do a yibum. And what we normally do these days is they go to a Beit Din, Jewish court of law, and there's a ritual of, I don't think it's spitting in the shoe, I think it might be spitting, he has to put on the shoe, or she puts the shoe on him. I never saw it, I have to brush up my laws, but I think she spits before him. I'm not sure if she actually spits in the shoe. But it's one of those things, you will never understand it till you see it, and you should never have to see it. I know rabbis, and one person actually I saw while waiting for a court date for a friend of mine who had a marriage court date, and I was assisting him to the Jewish court of law, and I thought to wait for 3 hours, and there was this guy waiting there. I said, "You ever see chalitza? It's called the chalitza ceremony, right?" And he said, "Koren." I said, "What was it like?" And he said, "It was like the most difficult thing he'd ever seen, except Tisha B'Av." Anyhow, usually in such a situation, nowadays, if there's a number of brothers, one brother is married and he dies before having children, usually we do chalitza to release himself. So that's what happened to who? King Aristobulus and Queen Shaltzion, or Shlomzion. Okay? So, but back then they didn't do the chalitza, they did yibum. The brother took on his deceased brother's widow as a wife. Specifically, Alexander Yanai, he had Sadducee tendencies. The Sadducees. What are the Sadducees? Sadducean. They didn't accept the Talmud as authoritative. They only accepted their own interpretation of the Tanakh. So Queen Shlomzion followed the Pharisees. That comes from the word parush. The Pharisee is like Chazal, basically. And even during her husband's reign, the Pharisees, they get a bad rap in the world. Truly, actually, the Pharisees wrote this book. So I have tremendous respect for the Pharisees. In terms of like world history, I understand that they must have done something wrong because the temple was destroyed. However, I can't fault them for it, and I don't accept the world's accusations against them. I think it's quite biased, to tell you the truth. Let's get back on the subject. So anyhow, after the death of Alexander Yanai, her son, she continued to rule. She was the queen of Israel for 9 years. So in those years, she serves as the political leader, and her brother Shimon ben Shattach guided daily life and religious life. And those were considered the happiest years for the people of Israel during the Second Temple period. They're under Shaltzion, or commonly known as Shlomzion HaMelka. So let's go on. So Neil, take it away. Just please, as loud as you can, because we're so far away from the microphone that we need to get a good recording.
Okay. The A Daf, this one? Okay. Naitama.
There's a question mark there?
Maitama.
Maitama.
Mishim Gadel Mi Maitama. Mai Chatat.
This isn't Chinese here. Maitama.
Maitama. Mishim Gadel Mi Hatam. Nigo Ba.
Oh, you speak Chinese? I didn't know you speak Mandarin. Here's it. Maitama. Mishum Gadel Mi Chatat Nagawa. Konnichiwa! No, please, just read it in American. Read it in American Jewish. My time.
Mishum Gedi May.
Again.
Mishum Geder May Chata Nigu Nagu Ba.
Mishum Geder May Chatat Nagu Ba. This you can use. This you can take it away.
With regard to the essence of the matter, the Gemara asks, what is the reason that they imposed a decree of previous impurity on metal vessels? The Gemara answers, due to a fence constructed to maintain the integrity of the water of a purification offering.
It's not a literal fence, it's a fence around the Torah, a protective measure. Please continue.
The sages touched upon it. In order to purify a vessel that came into contact with a corpse, one is required to have the water of a purification offering sprinkled on the vessel on the 3rd day and the 7th day, after it became impure, as it is written, he should be purified with it on the 3rd day, and on the 7th day he will become pure. And if he is not purified with it on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, he will not become pure. Numbers 19:20. This involves a significant inconvenience. If people will prefer to break or damage impure metal vessels in order to purify them more easily, the use of water of a purification offering will become obsolete. As a result, the sages decreed that metal vessels will remain impure until they undergo the purification process.
Okay, now, there's one thing about Daf Yomi. It's fast.
Oh,
we
yeah.
have about 20 minutes left, so you know what we're going to do?
Okay.
I'm going to read the Hebrew, and
Okay.
you're going to read the English
Oh.
as clearly and as fast as you can.
Okay,
Ready?
okay.
Here we go. Okay. הניחא למען זמר, לא לכל הטומאות אמרו, אלא לטומאת המת בלבד אמרו, שפיר. Kabul.
The Gemara asks, granted, according to the one who said that they did not say the decree of previous impurity on metal vessels with regard to all forms of impurity. Rather, they only said the decree with regard to the impurity caused by contact with a corpse. It works out well. In the case of impurity caused by a contact with a corpse, the sages issued this decree because its purification process is demanding. It requires immersion and sprinkling of the water, a purification offering on the 3rd and the 7th days. However, with regard to other forms of impurity, whose purification is accomplished by means of immersion alone, a person will not break a vessel in order to avoid immersion. Consequently, there is no need to institute a decree in those cases.
Switch. Read the Hebrew.
Ele למען דאמר לכל התרומות אמרו מאי איכה למאמר מאי איכה למאמר אמר אביי גזירה שמה לא יקבו ביכדי
גזירה שמה לא יקבו ביכדי
גזירה שמה לא יקבו ביכדי טהרתו.
Say again from Gezerah.
גזר שמה לא יכבו בכדי טהרתו. יכבנו. Sorry, I said it wrong. My mistake. My mistake. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Neil. I'm sorry. However,
גזר שמה לא יקבו בכדי טהרתו.
Correct.
Okay, my turn. However, according to the one who said that they said the decree of the previous impurity in metal vessels with regard to all forms of impurity, which includes those forms of impurity that do not require sprinkling of the water of purification for the purification, what is there to say? What is there to say as a rationale for the decree? Abaya said, Shimon ben Shetach considered a decree due to the concern that perhaps he would not perforate the vessel with a hole large enough to render it ritually impure. Ritually impure. Ritually impure. This is not Bob or Walter speaking. No, ritually impure. To purify a vessel by breaking it, one must make a hole large enough to ensure that the vessel will no longer be able to hold the content that it was designated to hold. Abaye explained that Shimon ben Shechach's concern was that one who values the vessel will not bake it sufficiently to render it ritually impure. Rava Amar, Gezerah Shema Yomru Tivila Bat Yoma Ola La. Mai Benaihu? Ika Benaihu Dirtsafinhu Mitzraf. Here. What does it mean?
it don't mean nothing.
Rava
said, it is a decree lest they say that immersion on the same day is sufficient for this vessel to be purified. People will be unaware of the manner in which the metal vessel became pure, and they will assume that its purity was achieved by means of immersion and not by means of breaking. That will lead them to the conclusion that any vessel becomes pure immediately upon immersion, and there is no need to wait for sunset, contrary to Torah law. Therefore, the sages decreed that prepared vessel to retain previous impurity. The Gemara asks, what is the practical difference between the reasons of Abaya and Rabbah? The Gemara answers, the difference between them is found in a case where he broke the vessel completely. If there was concern that perhaps he will not perforate it sufficiently, there is no longer room for concern. However, if there was concern, lest people say that immersion is effective on that day, there remains room for concern.
So, do you understand what he said? Okay, so let's unload it a little bit. What's the question? In the Gemara, you always go back to the initial question. The question is, Shimon ben Shetach made a gezerah about a marriage contract and impurity on metal vessels. Just to review. Metal vessels, you might have thought if they broke, that then they're pure, like a clay vessel. A clay vessel breaks, it's pure. An impure clay vessel breaks, it becomes pure. You can use the pieces in a state of purity. Right? They won't make anything impure. If you have a little piece of clay shard, you could use it to drink water out of, whatever, keep tithes in, whatever. Okay? No, because this whole story about Shaltzion the queen, the sages said, wait, no, you broke the metal vessels. The decree is that you can't put them back together; they'll still be impure. The reasons? I don't know, but we'll keep going. There's a difference between clay and metal, and that has to do with the reason. So the next thing we said was, why did they impose now the Gemara explained with what we just read. So it was a gezerah, it was a fence around the Torah, right? A protective measure to protect the law. Why? Because we know with the impurity of the dead, it was a big deal back then. And it's going to come back soon and be a big deal also. So, Shatova. So they had to sprinkle the water of the red heifer and all that, ash of the red heifer with the water and the whole process, right? So if it was so easy to put metal vessels back together, the use of the ritual purification from the ashes of the red heifer would become obsolete. We said that, okay? That's why. They didn't want to make it so easy that we lose the halacha of the red heifer. Okay? People would start disdaining the laws, so I started to protect the law. So the next thing, Gemara asks a question. Okay, the decree of Tuma Yeshana. This is the law of Tuma Yeshana, previous impurity. In other words, you had a metal cup, right? It was impure, right? It became impure in any way that can become impure. It broke, right? And they brought it to the blacksmith. He welded it all back together. If it broke and it's pure, like a clay vessel, it's still pure. If it broke with a metal vessel, you might say it's the same law. No, it's still impure because it has what they call Tuma Yeshana. The previous impurity stays even if it's put back together. Okay? So you might say that it's just from the dead, if it's the impurity from the dead, right? But really, it's the one who says that the decree is for all forms of impurity, not just for the impurity of the dead. So what's the rationale for that decree? If you say it's for all forms of impurity, Abaya said because it would be all you have to do. You have a metal plate, a glass plate. All you have to do is put a hole in it. You put a hole in it, that's considered broken. It can no longer hold soup. You put if it's a shallow bowl, let's say, has a hole in it, can't use it anymore, right? A plate has a hole in it. Who's going to use a plate with a hole in it? The sauce is going to get all over the place, kind of thing. It would be too easy to be a little bit. I don't want to use the word cheap here because I don't like these words like cheap. It's holding on to his stuff too much. I want to disdain the laws because my plate kind of thing. It's just a plate. So okay, some people are poor. It's probably maybe a big deal, but they wanted to. They basically were trying to protect the laws of purity. It was from a good reason, right? So, and then Rava said, according to Rava, the reason for the decree is the following. So all you need for these vessels to purify them is to put them in a mikveh or a spring. Right? Vessels become impure through become pure after they have become impure, you can purify them in a mikveh, right? And so, if you say that a metal vessel can only become impure through the mikveh and not by breaking, the simple people would get confused and say that any vessel can become impure only from a mikveh and not by breaking. That's and if it's so, the conclusion would be any vessel, it becomes pure right when you toivel it, right? Everyone knows what toivel is? Immersing. So, and then there would be no need to wait till sunset, because it's not just, with a vessel, it's not just putting it in the mikveh, but it's also waiting till it gets dark. Tzeta kochavim, right? So people they might not wait. They might say, oh, they toivel in the morning, good enough. Don't have to be careful about these rabbinic laws. The Sadducees would get all like uppity about this kind of stuff. Like, who needs those stupid rabbinic laws? Kind of. God forbid that should happen. So the sages said they made a decree that repaired vessels retain the previous impurity, which is called tuma yashana. Well, it still has the same impurity, even though it was broken and repaired. Okay. The difference between them is, okay, so what's the practical difference between Abaye and Rava? Well, what did Abaye say? Abaye said that Shimon ben Shechtach's decree of Tuma Yashana was, it might just make, it's too easy to make a hole in it and make sure it's truly pure, right? Then they just disdain the laws. Make a hole, big deal, and then fill it up with lead. Okay, it's all pure again. That's Abaye. Rava said, it's enough. Okay, it becomes tameh, and then I just put it in the mikveh. It's pure. Good enough. I don't have to wait till the night to use it. What's the practical difference between the two? It's a case where they broke the vessel completely, right? In which case, let's say, if there was a concern that perhaps he would not perforate it sufficiently, there's no longer room for concern. However, if there was concern, lest people say immersion is effective on that day, there remains room for concern. What did I just say? I read it and I didn't get it.
Concern for something.
What's Abaye saying? What does Rava say? Abaye said the law of Tuma Yashana that you can't is what? I'll say it one more time. I'll say it as many times as you want, really, as long as you have patience for it. It's a decree. The metal vessels, you think if they break, they're pure. Why do they say if the Shimon ben Shechtach comes along and says a metal vessel breaks, you put it back together, you solder it together, it's still impure? Why? The hole has to be large enough to ensure that the vessel will no longer be able to hold the contents, like we said. Right? It can't just be a little hole, it has to be a serious hole. It can no longer hold whatever it was holding. That's a way to purify perhaps a clay vessel, but not a metal vessel. Right? So Abaye explained Shimon ben Shechtach's decree. He said the one who values the vessel, he won't break it enough to make it pure. That's the reason. That's Abaye. Okay? Capish?
Mm-hmm.
Versteht? Okay. What did Rava say? Here, I'll tell you. Comfortable? Good. Okay, Rava said it's about immersing it. Remember, metal vessel becomes impure. They won't know how a metal vessel becomes pure. They won't know how to purify it. So they might think any vessel, all you have to do is put it in the mikveh, put it in the mayan, then I can use it right away. So Torah law, according to Doraita, it's not, you can't just put it in the mikveh and use it. You have to, in those days, in the laws of purity, you put it in the mikveh or the mayan. And I don't know if it makes a difference if it's living water or a mikveh that requires further study. It's toivled. You can't just use it right away. You have to what? Now, if Rava says when you toivel, it's not just a person who's a zav or a zava who has to, or a kohen who became impure to eat truma and all this stuff. It's not just going to the spring or going to the mikveh on the day that after the seventh day, or if it's a one-day tumah thing.
You have to wait till the evening.
Has to wait till night. Tzedek Kochavim. Right? That's, people might not know that that's true with the vessels also. So what does that have to do? That's Rava. Because they're going to say, hey, so it's a broken vessel. I put it back together. I have to take it to the mikveh. Okay, I'll take it to the mikveh, but I can use it right away. Whatever. They would get confused. It's not 100% clear, but we'll continue. So what's the practical difference between Abaya and Rava? The Gemara says, Ika benayu dirtsafinhu mirtsaf. Difference is that they found a case where he broke the vessel completely. If there was concern that perhaps he would not perforate it sufficiently, there's no room for concern. What does that mean?
They're concerned about it, they're not making a big enough hole.
And then it doesn't matter between Abaya and Rava. That's the reason. That's Abaya, right? Rava says it's about what? About not waiting till nightfall. Mm-hmm. Right? Then it needs to be clarified more. But we're just going to go on. So I'm going to read the Hebrew, and you're going to read the English.
Okay.
If you like, you don't have to. If you want to. But try not. You're talking like you're on TV or something. Just talk.
Talk normally.
No, you can soup it up if you want. Just it's up to you. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean the projection on being on the stage is lovely, but I think we need just reading. Anyhow, I'm going for the net.
Somebody's at the door.
So what? Do they want to come around? Hey, it's your house, man. Do you have anyone upstairs? Okay, I'm just going to read and you answer them. Ikamahi תתנן, המניח כלים תחת הצינור לקבל מהם מי גשמים, אחד כלים גדולים, אחד כלים קטנים, ואפילו כלי אבנים וכלי אדמה וכלי גללים, פוסלים את המקווה. אחד המניח ואחד השוכח. דברי בית שמאי, והטילו מטהרים ושוכח. אמר רבי מאיר, נמנו ורבו בית שמאי על בית הלל. ומודים בית... Could you close the door, please? נמנו ורבו בית שמאי על בית...
Excuse me? I want to take over some of the drinks now.
This is really...
This will be fun. She's having a haskara for her mother.
Oh, okay, covered.
Okay. Do you want to put on pause?
No, there's no way to pause.
Now come back and I'll get the other
no
drinks.
problem. You just walk that way, thank you. Okay, have a good...
I'll be right back.
Aliyah and Hashem. Okay. Avanim v'klei adamah v'klei galim.
Bring another key.
Anyhow, אפילו כלי אבנים וכלי אדמה וכלי גלים פוסלים את המקווה. אחד המניח ואחד השוכח, דברי בית שמאי. בית הלל מטהרים ושוכח, אמר רבי מאיר, נימנו ורב בית שמאי על בית הלל, ומודים בית שמאי בשוכח בחצר, שהוא טהור. אמר רבי יוסי, עדיין מחלוקת במקומה עומדת. Sorry about that. We're a low budget operation. To this point, several but not all of the 18 decrees were enumerated. The Gemara asked him, what's the other decree? The Gemara answers, we learned in the Mishnah tractate Mikvot, one who places vessel under the drain pipe in order to collect rainwater, the water collected in the vessels is considered drawn water, mayim she'uvim. This is true both in the case of large vessels, which due to their size do not become impure, and in the case of small vessels, and even if they were stone vessels, and earth vessels, and dung vessels, they used to actually make vessels out of dried excrement in the ancient world. It was accepted. It's not really accepted in Western countries today, but that's the ancient world. Okay, made from dry cattle dung, which were not considered vessels in terms of their ritual impurity. In other words, all of these materials, they could not become ritually impure, and they do not become impure. They don't become impure at all. So in that case, this ruling applies. The water in the vessels is considered drawn water in all respects. If it leaks from those vessels and flowed into a ritual bath and not yet reached full measure, 40 seah, which was what? We just had this, right? Between 240, one opinion is 240, another opinion is 480 milliliters, 40 seah. How much is a seah? A seah is 960 log. A hin is 12 log, etc. So that again. And even if they were stone vessels, and earth vessels, and dung vessels, there's still, the water in them is maim shuvim. That leaked from one of the vessels and flowed into a mikveh that had not yet reached 40 seah, (240 milliliters, or the other one, and filled it, and the drawn water filled up the mikveh. The drawn water invalidates the ritual bath. The Gemara adds that this halacha applies both to a case where one places the vessel beneath the drain pipe with premeditated intent to collect water flowing through it, as well as the case where one forgets the vessel is there and he fills it unintentionally. There's the question in the loss of purity whether one does something intentionally or unintentionally. It has legal ramifications. So, just as in civil law, also in ritual law, intent has ramification. This is the statement of Beit Shammai. What does Beit Hillel say? Beit Hillel deems the ritual bath pure. Beit Shammai says no, you filled it up with drawn water, not pure. Beit Hillel says yes, it is pure. It can fit to complete the full measure of the ritual bath in the case where one forgets the vessels. Rabbi Meir said they were counted in the attic of Chanina ben Chizkiah. Nimnu v'Rabu writes, and what happened? Beit Shammai outnumbered Beit Hillel. Again, these are the cases where Beit Shammai won over Beit Hillel. The overwhelming majority of the disputes, the legal disputes between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, are won by Beit Hillel. However, these 18 are the cases where we paskin according to Beit Shammai. Wouldn't it be wonderful to be a fly on the wall in the attic of Hanani ben Chizkiah to see what it was like to be with the sages, to be a dove in the window of the Sanhedrin? Wow. Anyhow, and or a hawk. Okay, and or an eagle. And Rabbi Meir said that Beit Shammai agree with Beit Hillel that in a case where one forgets vessels in the courtyard and they fill up with rainwater under the drain pipe, the water is pure. Rabbi Yosef said the dispute still remains in place in the Lashon Adayin Machloket Bimokoma Omedet. And Beit Shammai did not agree with Beit Hillel at all, according to Rabbi Yosef. Amar Rav Mesharshia. Amar Rav Mesharshia, Devei Rav Amrei, Hakol Modim Kishe Necham Bishat Kishur Avim Tmeim, Bishat Pizur Avim Divra Kol Matari. He says that everybody agrees that when you put them under the drain pipe on a cloudy day, they're tameh, and at a place when the clouds break and the sun shines, then everyone says that they're pure. The only dispute they had was when it's cloudy. Benit pazru, and then the clouds, and it was cloudy, and then the clouds scattered. Then they had a difference of opinion. But chazru benit kashru, it was cloudy, and the clouds scattered, and they came back. Then they have a little bit of a problem, right? Mar savar batala machshavato, mar savar lo batla machshavato. One says that the intention nullifies it, and the other says that, in other words, the way Rabbi Steinsaltz writes it here is, this sage, Beit Hillel, holds that because the clouds dispersed after he placed the vessels, he thought to fill the vessels, his thought to fill the vessels was negated. the vessels remained in the courtyard due to his forgetfulness, and when they filled afterwards, it was not his intention that they fill. Because why? It was cloudy, and he was expecting rain, then they came out and he said, I'm not going to get any water. And then they came back, and he didn't expect them to come back. And this sage, Beit Shammai, holds that his thought was not negated. His original intention was to fill them, despite the fact that it got sunny in the meanwhile. Rabbi Yosef Damar Machloket Tadaim B'Makom Omered Batzri Lahu. Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Af Benot Kutim Nidot Me'arisatan Bo B'Yom Gazra. So the Gemara wonders. According to Rabbi Meir, there's another decree. However, according to Rabbi Yosef, who said that the dispute remains in place, then they're not going to get up to 18. We're supposed to have 18 decrees, there's going to be one less. So, hi Neil, how's it going?
Okay,
how much time do we have left?
No, you're fine. You're fine.
If you want to join, you can join too.
I can't.
Anyhow, but just please don't walk in front of the camera. I'm going to move over here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then
It's okay. We're live here. Back to where we were saying. So the Gemara wonders, okay, according to Rabbi Meir, they added another decree to the total. According to Rabbi Yosef, if the dispute remains in place, we don't have 18 decrees, we only have 17. Okay? So, how are we going to get 18? So Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said, the decree that the daughters of the Shomronim, the Kutim, are considered to already have the status of menstruating women from the cradle, from their birth, that one was issued on that day. So the halacha is that any female who sees blood at menstruation is impure, regardless of her age, even if she's a day old. But the Samaritans, they didn't accept this halacha. The Samaritans, look, they have a Torah even still today, and it's very, very similar to our Sefer Torah. However, it's written the aleph and ayans and guttural letters, whatever. The spelling is all mixed up, and it's a little different. It has some changes in it that are mentioned in the Gemara. So there was always this thing between the Samaritans and the Jews. So the Samaritans, they didn't accept this halacha about what from when, even if it's because of a very extremely rare case that a baby sees blood in that way. So consequently, it's possible that there were girls among them who saw blood of menstruation before their coming of age, and the Samaritans ignored their impurity completely. Therefore, due to this uncertainty, the sages decreed impurity of all daughters of the Samaritans from birth. The Ikamahi Titanan. What's the other decree? As it is taught, Kol hametaltalid mevim et tuma ove hamardea. Amar Rabbi Tarfa. Akapach et banai shezo halacha mukupachat sheshama hashomea vata'a ha'ikar over umarda'o al ktefo ve'ihel tzido achat al hakever timu oto mishum kelim amahalim al emet. So the Gemara asks, what's the other decree? The Gemara answers, we learned in halachic tradition and Mishnah that all movable objects, metaltalim, that are the width of an ox goad, a thin cattle prod, basically. It doesn't add anything about the width of an ox goad here. So Rabbi again. There's a Mishnah that says all metaltalim that are width of an ox goad, a long stick to prod an animal, transmits impurity. It's a vessel, it's a movable object that is a bona fide vessel, and how thick does it have to be to transmit impurity or become impure or transmit impurity? The width of an ox goad. If one side of the object was over a corpse, the other side was over vessels, the vessel will become impure to the impurity of a tent over a corpse. In other words, a thin stick that's made into a vessel, it must have some sort of beit kibul somewhere, maybe not, I think it does. That remains to be seen. I haven't seen the law on that, but it's a vessel. It's not just a shute kleetz. It's not just a simple wooden vessel which would not become impure. It's grows from the ground, etc., separated from the ground. So, let's say there's is somebody, an Av Tuma touched it and becomes impure from the dead, and then it happens to be over your holy, not a holy cow. We don't believe in holy cows, do we? No, we believe in cows that are consecrated and brought to the temple and offered as a sacrifice to the one and only God of the whole world. So I don't know what they believe in India. Anyhow, so I'm not disparaging. I just don't know what they believe. All I know is that the cow is not intrinsically holy, but it's consecrated and offered as a sacrifice. So it's elevated through its use on Shabbat or by proper slaughter, and elevated through man's good actions and being used as man's energy to learn Torah and do mitzvot and good deeds. Anyhow, so let's say there's a cow. Let's say it's a vessel or something, or a person is underneath it. That's going to make it impure from the dead according to the laws of purity. It only has to be the thickness of an ox goad. If there's a dead corpse underneath it, that ox goad would become impure, and it would become a tameh mardea, ox goad. Rabbi Tarfon said, "I will bury my sons if this is not a truncated halacha." Very strong language. In other words, the one who heard it heard a halachic ruling contrary to a different situation and erred. He thought this halacha was established with regard to the following: movable objects with thickness of an ox goad transmit impurity to another vessel when the movable object is both the source of the impurity and the vessel at the same time. However, the original halacha is as follows. According to Rabbi Tarfon, it goes like this: Ha'ikar over umardo al tefo. If the farmer was passing and his ox goad was on his shoulder, ve'ihel tzido achat el hakever, and one side of the ox goad covered the grave, tzim'u oto mishum kelim ha'ma'alim al emet. The sage deemed the ox goad impure due to the impurity of the vessel that covers the corpse. So an object located over a grave becomes impure, according to Rabbi Tarfon. However, just because the ox goad itself became impure, it does not necessarily mean that it transmits impurity to objects. אמר רבי עקיבא, אני עד כאן שיהיו דברי חכמים קיימים, שיהיו כל המטלטלים מבין את הטומאה על אדם שנושא אותן בעובי המרדע, ועל עצמן בכל שן, על שאר אדם מקלים ופותח טפח. Rabbi Akiva said, I'll correct and explain the halacha, statements of the sages, so we will uphold the statements of Chazal. So it's like this: all movable objects transmit impurity to the person carrying them, if it's as thick as an ox goad, at least. So you could say that a round object with the circumference of an ox goad should have the legal status of a tent over a corpse. Something that serves as covering over a corpse not only becomes impure itself, but also transmits impurity. As it is written, anything that is in the tent will become impure for 7 days. Therefore, even the person carrying the ox goad becomes impure due to the ox goad. However, movable objects covered a corpse bring impurity upon themselves by means of this makeshift tent in any size, and there is no minimum measure. However, these objects that cover the corpse do not transmit impurity to other people who are not carrying them. At the same time, it's true with regard to vessels, unless the width of the vessels is at least 1 hand's breadth. אמר רבי ינאי ומרדע שאמרו אין בעוביו טפח ויש בהיקפו טפח וגזרו על היקפו משום עוביו. And Rabbi Yanai said, and the ox goad that they mentioned is specifically one in which the width is not a hand's breadth, however its circumference is a hand's breadth. And they, the sages, issued a decree on its circumference due to its width, not due to its to its circumference, just to its width. So if its width was a hand's breadth, this much, a potato, right? A few inches. What is this, 3-4 inches? Something like that. Therefore, they issued a rabbinic decree with regard to the object whose circumference is a hand's breadth, all the way around, which is longer, right? This is another of the 18 decrees. L'Rabbi Tarfon Amar akapach et banai shalacha zo mekupachat. So Rabbi Tarfon's extreme language, the Seder Rabbi Tarfon, he was supporting Rabbi Akiva's yeshiva. He was a big businessman. He was also a great scholar. He was also in the Passover Haggadah. So he made this very. He was convinced. He knew the halacha 200%. So he said, even on his son's life, which is quite an unusual. It's a little bit. One must think about how he would say such a thing. But anyhow, he said it. So he said, "I will bury my son if this is not a truncated halacha." The tally of the degree, the tally of the decree is lacking, meaning you only made 70 degrees. It's not. This is not the 18th decree. Rav Nachman Issel said the decree of the daughters of the Shomonim, the Samaritans, are considered to already have the status of menstruating women from their cradle. They issued that one on that day. That's the 18th. And the other matter of the drawn water, Mayim Shuvim, he holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. And therefore the tally of the decrees is complete. We didn't even finish Amud Aleph. We're going to try to get to the Mishnah just by reading fast. We're going to delve in the Gemara now. Here we go. V'idach habotzer lagat. Shammai omar hukshar, Hillel omer lo hukshar. Amru lo Hillel l'shammai mipnei ma botzrin batara, en moskin batara. So, somebody harvests grapes in order to take them to the wine press. Shammai says it prepares it. The grapes have been prepared for impurity, and Hillel says they've not been prepared. They have to get wet to. If they're dry and they become wet, they can be susceptible to contract tumah. So Hillel said to Shammai, "Why are you harvesting impurity, and you're not?" For what purpose do they harvest the grapes in purity? However, they don't harvest olives in purity. Harvesting grapes is botzer lagat. That's harvesting grapes. That's done in purity. And muskin is harvesting olives. So why grapes and not olives in purity, in a state of purity? According to your opinion, the liquid that seeps out renders the fruit susceptible to impurity. Why is there not a similar concern with regard to liquid that seeps out of olives? Amarlo, im taknite gozrani tuma af al hamesika. Natsu cherev bebet midrash. Amru, hanichnas yikanes v'yotze al yetze. V'oto yom haya Hillel kafuf v'yoshev livnei Shammai k'echad min hatalmidim. והיה קשה לישראל כיום שנעשה בו עגל, וגזור שמה בהלל, ולא קיבלו מניהו, ועתו תלמידיו גזור וקיבלו מניהו. Shammai said to him, if you provoke me and insist there's no difference between grapes and olives, then in order not to contradict this, I will decree impurity on the gathering of the olives as well. So they related to him that since the dispute was so intense, they stuck a sword in the study hall and said, one who wants to come in, he can enter, but nobody can come out until they decide the halacha. That day Hillel was bowed, and he was brought low and was sitting before Shammai like one of the students. Hillel was bowed. I think that should say Hillel was brought low, but what do I know? Anyhow, it says here Hillel was bowed and was sitting before. It makes sense. It's proper English. Hillel was bowed and was sitting before Shammai like one of his students. The Gemara said, and that day was as difficult for Israel as the day the golden calf was made, as Hillel, who was the Nasi, was forced to sit in submission before Shammai. Hillel related back to King David, right? And he was traditionally the Nasi's family, the president of the Sanhedrin, came from Beit Hillel. But on that day, the direct descendants in the traditional of the King David and the Shammai may have also been related. I don't know, but such a situation was as difficult as the day the golden calf was made. Shammai and Hillel issued that decree, and the people did not accept it from him. Their students came and issued the decree, and the people then accepted it from him. It's only once the students accepted it. Now when the Rebbe's accepted it, the people didn't listen. But once the Talmidim started accepting it, then the people, all of Israel started to accept it. We're just going to get to the bottom of the page, and then I'm sorry we didn't do the whole daf in 50 minutes like I tried. We're working towards it. So, my time, Amar Zeiri, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Gezer Shema Yivatzru B'kupot Tmeot. What's the reason they decreed the liquids that seeped out from the grapes unintentionally render the grapes susceptible to impurity? Rabbi Zeiri said, the Rabbi Chanina said, the sages issued a decree concerned lest he gather the grapes in impure baskets. So, Hanicha Laman Zamar Kli Tamei Choshev Mashkin. That's well with one who says that an impure vessel is considered like liquid. An impure vessel accords liquids in it. An impure vessel, if the vessel is impure, the liquids in it are also impure. Right? That's a gezerah. However, according to the one who says that an impure vessel doesn't make the liquid in it impure, what can be said? How do you explain the gezerah? Rather, Rabbi Zeri said that Rabbi Chanina said, the reason is not as we suggested, rather there's a gezerah, decree instituted by the sages, lest he gather them in pitched baskets. So, what are we talking about? So since liquids that seep out of the grapes don't spill out of the baskets because they're sealed, right? They used to seal them with pitch. So because of that, it's opportune for him to have the liquids seep out of the grapes. It's beneficial for his production to have the liquids seep out of the grapes. In other words, there's kavana. Remember we talked about how intention is very important for the laws of impurity? So it's good for him. There's an intention. He wants the liquid to seep out. Thereby, because it accelerates the production of wine press. Liquid seep out, good for business. Yeah? So because the seeping out of liquid is opportune, it renders the grapes susceptible to impurity. Huchshar l'tumah. Again, the grapes, if they're dry, just on the tree, just came off the tree and they never got wet, they can't become impure. It's only once they become wet that they can become impure. Rav Amar Gezerah Mishum Anoshcha. Rav Nachman Amar Rabba Bar Avua Pa'amim she'adam olech l'charmo l'da yim igiu ha'anavim l'tzira o lo. V'notel eshkol anavim l'sochto. U'mezalef al gabei anavim. U'vishat b'tzira adayin mashke tofeach aleim. Rabba said, the reason for the decree is the case of a liquid is squirted out when he separated the clusters of the grapes that were stuck together. Since he did it by his own hands, consciously and willfully, right? So the liquid that seeps out renders the grapes susceptible to impurity. Just as Rav Nachman said that Rav Bar Avua said, sometimes the person goes to his vineyard, he wants to know whether or not the grapes have reached the time for the gathering, right? And he takes a cluster of grapes to squeeze it, right? And grape juice sprays all over the place, right?
Is Neil here?
I think he's upstairs. Based on the quality of the juice, he determines whether or not the grapes are sufficiently ripe. Couldn't she please knock? Anyhow, based on the quality, well, it's her house, okay. Anyhow, based on the quality of the juice, he determines whether or not the grapes are sufficiently ripe. If so, this grape juice that's squeezed out, right, by his own hand, intentionally, makes it muchshar l'tumah, susceptible to impurity. So in that case, even at the time of gathering, it is conceivable that liquid is still moist on the grapes. So, well, on the next daf, we're going to get to what the rest of the decrees were.